Your resume says that you minored in French culinary arts. Most students, they're working the fryer at KFC, but you bust tables at Il Picador to support yourself. And then you get out of college, and you come and you work here. How much did they first pay you to give up on your dreams?
27 grand a year.
And when were you going to stop and come back and do what makes you happy?
Good question.
I see guys who work at the same company for their entire lives, guys exactly like you. They clock in, they clock out, and they never have a moment of happiness.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. Thanks for bringing me along as you go to the gym and work out. Thanks for bringing me along as you go for a walk or driving around, running errands, doing stuff around the home, whatever it is you do when you're listening to podcasts. Thanks for bringing me along. Today on the show, I talk with Malcolm Ethridge. And I got to be honest, I'm glad he was able to make the time because he's a busy guy. He's the founder of the Capital Area Planning Group. He's a regular contributor on CNBC, author of the book Financial Independence Doesn't Happen by Accident. And I've known Malcolm for over a decade. I've always had the sense that he's a guy who enjoys his job and works hard on behalf of his clients. But I didn't realize until this conversation, he's basically been wired like this since he was a kid. As you will hear, he had so many side hustles and jobs as a teenager. Between that and going to school, I'm surprised he was able to sleep. And the solution he came up with to make his college education more affordable is one I'd never heard of before in my entire life. You kind of have to hear it to believe it. So let's get to it with Malcolm Ethridge. What's an early memory of money that you have?
My niece, who is 11, lost her money. She had like $15 or something. And she lost her money and wasn't overly distraught about it. And I was kind of like, what the heck kind of kid doesn't care about $15 or whatever it is? And it took me back to a family vacation that we took when I was somewhere around 9 or 10, so similar in age. And I lost $10 that I had for the trip. And I tore up the entire car looking for it, tore up our entire hotel room looking for it. My parents are helping me look for it. I'm like in distress the whole rest of the trip, thinking about the fact that I lost this $10. I have literally never lost cash ever again since then. Like that's how, and it still bothers me as I'm sitting here talking to you about it, if you can't tell, because I do not like to lose. Like the feeling of losing matters more to me than the feeling of winning. And that informs a lot of everything else that I do in life. It's the reason I don't gamble very often, because the feeling of losing sticks with me significantly longer than I really care about winning.
Where was the vacation?
It's Myrtle Beach.
Did you have plans that you remember? Did the 9-year-old version
of you
souvenirs?
know?
Souvenirs.
Yeah, so being able to buy something with my own money was a big deal. And I actually had my own money because as long as I can remember, I was the kid always hustling something. Like I got in trouble at school several times because I would go to Sam's Club with my mom and I would buy like a box of fruit roll-ups, take them to school and sell them for like $2 each, but the box cost $5. Or I would buy Lunchables from the grocery store and then take them to school and sell them to kids who didn't have lunch for like $10. And my teachers were upset because they're like, he's selling this to his classmates for so much more than it actually costs. And I'm like, but they're paying for it. So clearly they see the value in it. They have the money. What's the problem? And my mom is finally like, look, dude, you're not wrong, but you're wrong, right? Like they say you're in violation of the rules. Even if this makes mathematical sense to you, you can't do it. So I would always try and find these workarounds to be able to sell candy after school. I'd stand outside the gate of the school and sell it to people before and after school. So technically I'm not breaking the rules because I'm not inside the school grounds. Like those kind of things I would always, and that was 8, 9, 10 years old.
I was just going to say, is this like 3rd grade, 4th grade?
So my family, we were never poor, right? Like we always had enough money for the things we actually needed. So I say that I grew up broke. We didn't grow up poor. So we had money for lights and food and, you know, a family vacation to Myrtle Beach once a year and all that stuff. But there wasn't money for the extra stuff that I always wanted. But I always wanted the extra stuff because my classmates had it. And so I wanted what they had. So my mom would say, like, if you want those things, my job is to give you what you actually need. Clothes on your back for school, food in your belly, that kind of stuff. I'm not doing all the extra. You're going to have to figure out how to get your own money. And I was like, you said that to the wrong person. Challenge accepted. And so I would always think up these schemes to figure out ways to get my hands on a few dollars. And I mean, when I say schemes, I don't mean like illegal card games in the basement, but like legitimate schemes of how I'm going to turn $10 into $50. My dad would literally lend me $10 to go to the store to buy, you know, a box of candy, and I had to pay him back. And that was my first learning of how startup costs factor into running a business. Because when he said, I want my $10, I see you've made your money, I want my $10. He really wanted his $10.
Sure.
And that hurt. I thought I had $50. Really, I had 40. I guess it's good, you know, training in hindsight because it helped me understand the costs of starting and running a business. But those are really the earliest memories that transitioned into, I would shovel snow when it snowed here in the area. And I would get out at 6 a.m. before anybody else was out there. And by the time my friends in the neighborhood were finally coming out at like 9 or 10, I was walking home with a few $100s in my pocket because here in the DC area, you got a lot of like metro drivers, you got a lot of government employees, public works type people that are all interspersed with your doctors and lawyers and every other kind of high paying job in the area. And everybody lives shoulder to shoulder with each other. And so I would find the people who looked like they were up early and knock on their doors at 6:30 in the morning. And it got to a point where people even started to expect me. Or they would call and leave a message on our answering machine, right? This is a long time ago, in the 90s. They would leave a message on our answering machine for me to say, hey, it looks like it's going to snow. I'll need you to come by in the morning if you're out shoveling. Like, I mean, literally it was that dialed in to the point that when I was going off to college, I was 17 and I had a lawn care business where I had actual employees. Like I would send friends in the neighborhood to a person's house to cut their grass. And then I would come by later and collect the money and share it with that person because I had those clients in the neighborhood who called my house to have me come and cut their grass or rake their leaves or whatever on a scheduled day. And demand just got to be at a place where I couldn't do it myself. So I would send my friends out. All told, by the time I was supposed to be going off to school, somewhere around July-ish, I was really thinking, like, do I even need to go to college? Like, the point in going to college is to figure out how to get a job, how to earn a living. I've already figured that out. Thankfully, my mom pointed out to me that, you know, this is a seasonal gig. You're not going to be able to make this kind of money forever. But annualized, I was looking at something like $30,000 a year I'd be making. And that was the most money anybody was ever going to make to me at 17. So I was like, I don't need college. What's the point in
So a couple of questions here. Do you, at any point when you're a teenager, have a job where you are working for someone else? Or is this lawn care business your first quote-unquote job?
Yeah, so the reason I didn't have the time or the capacity to do the lawn care anymore by the time I was a senior in high school was because I actually had two jobs, like two formal jobs. But I had built up this clientele. They had even created a listing in the newsletter for our town that allowed you to list like your service that you're offering and your phone number and all that, which is why even more people came to find me. And so...
What was the name of your business?
It didn't have a formal name. It was just like they literally would put Malcolm Ethridge Lawn Care and then our home phone number. And so my dad would get annoyed that more people were calling me than were calling him. But yeah, so I worked at Hollywood Video in high school, a Blockbuster spinoff, a competitor that no longer exists either. I was an assistant to a trainer at Gold's Gym for the summer. I worked at Home Depot the summer between my freshman year and going back to school. And then while I was in college, I worked at Halloween Adventure, which is one of those Halloween stores that shows up in a strip mall for about 5 or 6 weeks, you know, dressed up in costumes, handing out flyers. Like, I mean, you name it, I have had the jobs. And I can't think of a point since I was probably 9, 10 years old where I wasn't working either for myself in some, unofficial way or formally working for somebody in a part-time, kind of gig.
You went to North Carolina A&T.
Mm-hmm.
What did you study?
So I originally went there to be a computer engineer. And 2 years into the program kicked me out. I don't mean that literally, but I was sitting in a midterm for, I want to say it was like electronic circuits or electric circuits 2. That's it. Electric circuits 2. And I looked, and by the time I was just getting all of my materials out of the packaging, half the class was finishing up and going to turn in their project. And I was like, you know what? I think the universe is speaking to me. And so I went to my professor at the end of the class, who happened to be my academic advisor too, and said, you know what, Dr. Brown, I don't think this is for me. I don't think this is going to be it. And he sat back in his chair, took off his glasses and said, I was hoping you would. And I said, if you thought that.
I've been watching you.
Pretty much.
And I agree 100%.
He didn't try to convince me anything else. The academic advisor's job is to keep the good students in the program. He said, I've been hoping you would come to this. Yeah. So anyway, what he asked me was, what else do you think you'd want to do? And I thought, the only other thing I've ever cared about is making money. So I'll go to the business school. And that ultimately informed my decision-making. It was just, I'm going to go to the business school. I'm going to study something business related, and then I'll figure it out from there. And I ended up going to do a marketing and management concentration because it was the easiest thing to graduate with based on the coursework that I had already taken. So it wouldn't set me back and have me there for 6 years after taking 2 years worth of engineering courses that didn't transfer to anybody's anything. So they were like, you took Cal too, good for you. Doesn't matter. We don't really, we don't need you to take that level math here. I couldn't believe that the math part wasn't the thing that really kicked me in the butt the way everybody had warned me going into engineering. But I'm very glad that the universe spoke the way that it did and ultimately made that shift. It wasn't an easy decision because I actually had an academic scholarship that I had to forfeit in order to change my major, which my mom had a really hard time with.
I was just going to say, how'd that go over?
Well, I found a solve for it. If you haven't already found the kind of through line, I'm very much about like non-conventional ways to solve problems. And so what occurred to me was, if I went and bought a house in North Carolina, my tuition as an in-state student would actually be less than what I was on the hook for as an out-of-state student with a partial scholarship. And so I ended up buying a house in Greensboro, North Carolina, the summer right before my junior year to get that in-state tuition. And
how old are you at this point?
19.
And are your parents helping you with the down payment?
So my grandparents both passed. My grandma passed my sophomore year in college, and she ended up leaving me something like $6,000, $7,000. That was my down payment that I used to buy the house. So I bought the house with a part-time job. I was working at Home Depot part-time. I don't even know if they asked me to prove income. This is 2007, right? So you can imagine what was happening then. Talk about timing. I bought this house.
I was going to say, no, we're just looking to sell houses to anyone.
August 2007. And then you know what happened 3 months later.
So it sounds like a small confession on your part that you are one very, very tiny reason for the Great Recession. You're part of the problem. You're like, here's a 19-year-old kid, and we're just going to give him a mortgage.
I would say two things. I benefited immensely because I earned a very good education in real estate by becoming an accidental landlord later. But I also was a huge beneficiary of no-doc loans. And so depending on which side you want to look at it, right, there are some people that these kind of, underwriting considerations may have been good for. And then there's the majority of the people that these kind of underwriting considerations were foolish.
Do you remember pitching your parents on the idea, I, at the age of 19, am going to buy a house in another state? Do you remember that conversation and their reaction?
I do. So I should go backwards and tell you that I am the product of what I'm assuming most of the people listening to this have at least heard of the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? And the way that I jokingly frame my upbringing is rich mom, poor dad. And I don't mean that literally in the sense that one parent was rich and the other one was poor, because I grew up with both my parents in the same house. But what I mean by that is my mom is an extremely frugal person, does not spend money on anything that isn't absolutely necessary. And like, even then, it's a hard decision for her. My dad's the exact opposite. If he's got $1, he's got $1 to spend. And so I learned between the two of them and kind of have merged those into my own thinking about money. But going back to your original question, I only talked to my mom about this idea. And when I laid it out to her, at first she was kind of like, I don't know that is something that you want to take on at 19. It sounds like a lot. But then also by that point, my parents recognized that like me saying this is something I'm thinking about doing isn't entirely true. What I really mean is this is what I've already decided I'm doing, and I'm now informing you of my decision. And so immediately she said, well, I mean, it sounds logical. There's far worse things you could be doing with your inheritance. I'm glad that you're not going out and using it on, God knows what substance to put into your body to hurt yourself. I'm glad that you have sense enough to, put that money into something that's
fund
an
a
investment.
weekend in Vegas.
Right. So I'm really glad to hear that part. And I also understand your logic that buying a house in North Carolina is not that much more expensive than the rent that you're paying as a college student renting an apartment with 3 other people. And so I'm with you. I get it. I can see your logic. So anything I can do to help support you, I will do it. But just know that there's not a lot there. There's not a lot of wiggle room. There's not a lot of backstop, if you will, in case you haven't completely planned this out the way you thought you did and get into a situation.
In terms of your college degree, makes perfect sense that you would look to how can I have credits transfer?
Mm-hmm.
What's the pathway to a diploma? And you're certainly not the first person or the last person to say, well, I'm going to get this degree and I'm going to figure it out from there. So you graduate with this degree in marketing and business management. And at what point does investing and the pathway to a job in the financial industry come into your consciousness?
So funny enough, I didn't realize it at the time, but I already had a penchant for this type of work. So my earliest stock ownership came when I was 11, and I had to own it in a custodial account. But I mentioned that my family, we didn't have money for all the extra stuff, which included Jordans, the shoes, which at the time, right, I'm growing up in the early 90s, it's a big deal to a kid to have a pair of Jordans and then the matching sweatsuit and the headbands and the hats and all the other stuff that Nike wanted to sell you. I didn't have any of it. And to the extent that my family, my mom specifically, would buy my school shoes from Payless. So the extreme opposite end. So you got $150 Jordan sneakers and you got $5 Payless shoes that are actually knockoffs sometimes of the Jordan sneakers, which I got a lot of help for, but that's a whole different, therapy session for another day. But what I learned from talking to my mom about the way stocks worked was that every time one of my classmates' parents, grandparents, whoever bought them a pair of Jordans for Christmas or their birthday or whatever, if I own stock in Nike, I get paid whenever they ring the register. And that was enticing to me as a vengeful 10, 11-year-old who didn't like the fact that I couldn't own the shoe or wear the shoe. And so once I understood that that's the way that stock worked, that I own a fractional interest in this company, and anytime people are crazy enough to spend $150 on a new pair of shoes for an 11-year-old, I'm going to get a piece of that action. That really spoke to my soul as the capitalist that I didn't realize I was at the time. And so I owned 2 shares of Nike stock then when I was in 5th, 6th grade. And since then, it's just been a thing.
You still own it?
I don't anymore. I sold it in college. But that was my entree. And I did actually buy a few more stocks when I was in college. Apple was one of them. Everything I ever owned in earlier days, I ended up having to sell because I did need the cash for something. But I remember trading on E-Trade when I would sit there and literally think, do I think this is a good enough idea to spend $16 on the brokerage fee?
Right.
And that was the gate keeping me from making my $100 buy of Apple shares or whatever the thing was. And that existence of that little bit of friction, I think, helped to inform the way that I think about stocks today too.
Since you brought up the trading fee, I'm curious your opinion on this, because you're a financial professional, and I've heard the argument before that free trading is essentially you open an account with Schwab or whoever, at this point it's free to trade. And the argument goes like this: if there's a fee, even if it's $10, 15, 20, whatever it is, there's a small fee. Not let's go back to the days of the 1970s and 80s where it's hundreds of dollars to make a single trade. But if there's some type of fee, that will help people make smarter decisions. Do you buy that argument? Because there are times where I think to myself, that actually makes sense.
If we want people to invest, absolutely yes. So you and I, parents of people who we care about the money decisions that they will make in the future, definitely want that little bit of friction between you and making that purchase, even if it's $5. I like the idea that there's something that makes you think, do I really want to place this trade? If we collectively, the powers that be, the people that own the rails, the people that own the infrastructure, the Schwab, the Robinhood, the Coinbase, the whoever else, I want to eliminate that friction because I want you placing as many transactions as possible, because transaction volume is what feeds my bottom line, which is what feeds my shareholders every quarter that, keeps that price going up. So it depends on which seat you sit in. But as a person who wants to see people learn how to invest for the long term, I don't even mean invest for 50 years. I mean invest for 2, 3, 5 years. Every time you got prompted, do you want to pay an extra $16.99? I remember that number on E-Trade to place this trade. It makes you think, do I really believe in this thing that I'm doing, or am I just doing a thing to do a thing? So I firmly, to answer your question, believe that there should be that little bit of friction, unless I am the institutions that house the people doing the trading.
Coming up, we've got the speed round, and spoiler alert, Malcolm reveals he's a runner. And I'm kicking myself a little bit because I forgot to tell him he can save money on running shoes and all kinds of athletic apparel by using the promo code MONEY if he shops at runpacers.com. Come on, people, we are halfway through 2025. Be honest, how are you doing with that fitness goal that you set for yourself back in January? You remember? Well, I'm telling you, Pacers has whatever you're looking for in terms of workout gear, brands you want like Nike, Asics, Brooks, Hoka, New Balance, workout apparel for men and women, accessories, and you get 10% off when you use the promo code MONEY at runpacers.com. Click the link in the show notes or go to runpacers.com. You can get the stuff you want and you get 10% off by using the promo code MONEY. All right, let's get back to Malcolm. You mentioned the difference in your parents in terms of their approaches to money. Mm-hmm. How much did you and your wife talk about money before you got married?
Our first date.
First date?
Literally our first date.
Who brought it up?
She did. Doing what I do for a living, right? I'm a person who people pay to help them make smart money decisions. I try my best to keep my professional life separate when I'm in personal settings, because I don't want people to feel like they're having to go to the dentist office every time they sit down to have a meal with me. And so I try my best to leave it out of all personal conversation, especially back then when I was dating. And so my wife is funny enough, my wife is actually the cheap one in our relationship. But she brought up money. She talked about it probably our first 3, 4, 5 dates. She did know what I do for a living. I was working at Merrill Lynch at the time. So it's kind of obvious that I would be interested in the conversation, but she threw it out there. I took it and ran with it and said, since you asked, whatever. But I don't know that the first date is the best place to bring that up. It probably wouldn't land as well if it's a person who...
Can we order our meal first?
Literally. But I definitely think that a lot of younger people do themselves a disservice by avoiding the conversation that they know they absolutely have to have until it's too late, right? Like a lot of times folks will couple up, move in together even, and get married without ever really having an understanding of each other's finances. Then they find themselves in my office somewhere in their mid-40s trying to figure out how do we merge all this crap that we've done to ourselves separately and figure out how to make it work together. Or God forbid, where you hear the term gray divorce, people in their late 50s, mid 60s getting divorced. It's happening because one person has been driving the other person absolutely nuts with the way that they manage their money. And just being able to have a conversation where you say, this is how I think we should do X. No, I think we should do it this way. And figuring out if there is a way to merge those two schools of thought, or if this is a path you shouldn't be going down because it's doomed from the beginning. I think that's a real conversation that needs to be had, and a tough decision maybe that you ultimately end up having to make, but you save yourself 30, 40 years of stress by getting it out there in the beginning.
Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing you have bought that makes you happy?
Running shoes. I am a marathoner, and I don't spend money on shoes normally. The thing that I do not have any regrets, any dollar that I spend whatsoever, anything related to the running category, but specifically really good running shoes.
I'm right there with you on that. Have you ever made a purchase that you regret that you still think about? I know you still think about the $10 you lost on vacation, but is there something you've purchased?
Not really. I'm a person who usually makes a decision and then just lives with the consequences, good or bad. And I can't really, and I also don't make impulse purchases very often. So I've probably looked at, thought about, kicked it around for months before I ultimately bought the thing. So I can't really think of anything that I'm really still stuck on. Oh my God, I can't believe I bought that.
Based on what you said, this next question may not land at all then. What is the last thing you splurged on just for yourself? Not for your wife or family or friends, just you. Is it running shoes?
Probably. I mean, literally, I think 3 weeks ago, my wife was like, how many pairs of running shoes do you have?
Oh, so you're like that.
Yeah.
How many do you have?
10 maybe.
10 pair?
Yeah.
Wow.
But they're in rotation. They don't just sit. Well, that's not true. I have a couple in the closet that are sitting. But I like to rotate them to
Sure, yeah.
You know all the reasons why.
Yeah.
So literally I bought a pair of running shoes and I mentioned I'm going to break these out. And she's like, how many pairs of running shoes do you have? It's my one vice.
Is it inflicting on her space in any way?
No, we have the opposite problem where even my running shoes and the way that they're packed away in the closet don't hold a candle to how many pairs of shoes that I will never fit as a size 7.
What is one thing about money that you wish you knew earlier in life?
I read, as I mentioned, Rich Dad, Poor Dad way back when. I was in college the first time I read it. I actually ended up reading it probably once a year or once every 18 months maybe, I take something new away from it every time. Even still, I wish that I had really understood the value of making your money work for you earlier than I got it. Somewhere around 2021, it clicked and it has informed my entire career since then. But I wish even that somewhere around 15, 16 maybe, I had really understood how to build a portfolio of assets that will someday pay you to stay in bed versus you having to get up and work for a paycheck every day for 5 decades.
Did you have friends in college who were like...
I thought you were going to stop there, didn't I?
No. Did you have friends in college who were like-minded, or I should say of similar interests? Were there other people you were hanging out with who were like, hey, what is that book you keep reading?
Yeah, no, my friends were annoyed by how obsessed I was with money. I mean, annoyed, which is part of the reason I say I try my best now to keep it out of general conversation. because most people don't want to have to think about money on a regular basis. It's so taboo and whatever else. But now my friends see what I do for a living. They see me on TV, on podcasts like this and everything else, and they're like, yeah, that makes sense.
One last question related to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Mm-hmm. You've gone through the process of writing a book. Mm-hmm. To what extent, if any, did money inform that process? Because everyone I know who has written a book, even when it goes well, it takes a lot of time, not just the writing part, but just everything that goes into it. And it's one of those things that for a lot of people is borderline exhausting. Mm-hmm. And so that's a serious thing to undertake. And I'm curious, what role, if any, money played in the decision to write that book?
I didn't do it to get rich, that's for sure. I think I just got a royalty check in the mail, not in the mail, it was a direct deposit that surprised me, not because it was so large, but because it existed. I had forgotten that I was entitled to royalties from the book, because that's how little I had thought about. Like, once you put it out there, it's out there, and you can either go the route of somebody who wants to write a New York Times bestseller that's got to sell X million copies in order for it to actually pay off for you and the publisher, or the other direction, as a person who I've known you for quite a while now, so you know I'm never short on opinions. The focus is really, I have an opinion. It's a strong opinion. I feel like the world needs to hear it because I'm self-important enough to feel like everybody needs to know what I think. And I'm just going to put it out there and it'll do what it does.
I want this thing to exist, and the only way for that to happen is for me to actually sit down and write it.
Pretty much. I have an idea for what the next book will be, because I'm crazy enough to do it twice. And the framing that I gave myself in this process, finishing the first one, now thinking about the next one, what is it about money that I would want my daughter to know directly from my own lips if I'm not here to tell her? And that is the way that I think now about the writing process. What information do I have that I think I'm uniquely positioned to share with my family that I would want them to have from me if I'm not sitting here to tell them for whatever reason?
What is a charitable cause that you like to support?
Anything education related, but specifically the Thurgood Marshall College Fund and then my university, North Carolina A&T, are the places I donate money to.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series that has money as a through line?
Wow. A lot of the things that I watch happen to have money as a through line. I love Billions. I love how fantastical it is and also true at the same time. I love the show Succession, not just because of all the drama, but because I see it intricately from the inside with the clients that we deal with, who have amassed some small fortune for themselves, but can't figure out a way to give up enough control to hand anything over to their kids. Also recognizing that the moment they're no longer here and they're throwing dirt in their face at their funeral, their kids are going to get their hands on it one way or another. And they still can't mentally figure out a way to make that switch and to start to think about that handoff. That fascinates me. And so those two shows I've actually watched more than once all the way through.
Last thing is a penny for your thoughts. And this is any bit of life wisdom you've picked up that you want to share with people who are listening. It can be about money, but it doesn't have to be. It can be about anything.
Well, I think just my own daily mantra that I remind myself literally every day when I walk into my office is do something today that your future self will thank you for. So it doesn't have to be anything heavy. It could be simply reading a white paper about Bitcoin, which is literally what I did this morning before I saw you. It could be, having that tough conversation with someone internally, or just picking up the phone and calling my mom to say hi for 5 minutes. Like, literally just do one thing today before the day is over that your future self is going to thank you for.
Malcolm's book is Financial Independence Doesn't Happen by Accident. It is as straightforward a blueprint for building wealth as any book I've encountered. So check it out. Next week on the show, best-selling author Charles Duhigg. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.